presenting dense information in public forum. Is forum plural or singular or both? Help. I think it might be both.
Yeah, it could be both.
It could be both, right. Okay, so presenting dense information. What's your discipline? What are you in graduate school for?
I'm in the Rutgers Business School MBA program.
Great, don't move it, it's fine. And Yuan, what are you studying?
I'm also from business school. I'm in the fourth year of my PhD program. My major is international business.
Wow, fantastic. And you? What?
I'm a graduate of Rutgers Business School.
Fantastic.
Concentration in strategy and leadership over business and
Okay, alrighty. So 3 business people, essentially. Interestingly, dense information can mean something different in business than it can in a more academic topic. It means something different to everybody, but the focus of what we're going to do for the next few minutes is talk about how to make your point clear to people that don't necessarily have a deep background in your discipline, in your area of expertise. So that's what we're talking about when we say dense information in a public forum, in a public scenario. So a lot of people registered for this class, and just to give some background, most of them were somewhat confident about their public speaking skills, which is a good thing. How would all of you vote in terms of your level of confidence in your public speaking? Would you say somewhat confident, very confident, not so confident? What do you think? Somewhat. You want?
I was hoping somewhat.
Somewhat, okay.
Yeah, between someone and not.
Between somewhat and not. Okay, so the interesting thing about this is that if you look at the list of areas for improvement that people gave when they registered, every single thing on this list can be improved. These are all skills or capabilities that you can improve, and many of them just by practicing for a couple of seconds a day. Not by spending years and years of your life, but just by focusing on, this is what I want to improve, and giving it a few seconds of practice a day. Yeah, of course.
So, will the PowerPoint be shared with us later?
Yes, I'm going to get your email addresses and I will send you the PowerPoint. Okay? And I'll also, if you don't object, I'd love to sign you up for my newsletter as well. And I have a book for you. I have copies of a book that I wrote about public speaking, so don't leave without that. Okay? So, all of these things and anything else that you can think of in public speaking is a skill that can be built and developed. And the reason for that is that you have 2 things going on in public speaking. One of them is very natural, the other is very artificial. So the natural part is talking. Something that we've all been doing since we were generally toddlers, 8 months to a year and some number of months. The ability to talk to people, to verbalize, to make our wishes known using words, it's a natural human thing. You'd have to be raised in the woods by bears to not know how to talk, and everybody who's in graduate school does know that, right? Public speaking adds an artificial component to that. It adds a component of polish, what I'm going to call polish, meaning there's a professionalism, there's a smoothness that gets added to natural talking to make it be speaking, public speaking. Now, there's a reason why you want that polish and that professionalism. And here's the reason. This is what I call the public speaking relationship. And if you look at the triangle on the inside, you see that there are 3 elements in the relationship. There's content, there's the person who's presenting it, on this chart known as you, and there is the person or people who are listening, on this chart known as the audience, right? So you've got that 3-way relationship. The content holds it up, but what you really want is that connection at the top where the content moves you and me closer together, because the content is a mutual interest that we share. You're kind of curious, hopefully, and I want you to understand it, and that creates a relationship between us. Here's how it's different than just talking. If you're just talking, you're hanging out at your home, you're talking to somebody, and you say something, and they don't understand you, they're supposed to say, hey, what? Right?
Yeah.
But when you're speaking, if you're up here like me, if you're in my position, in the hot seat as the speaker, one of the responsibilities that I assume by taking on the role of speaking to you, I take responsibility for your understanding. Not that I can guarantee it, but that I've committed to trying to be as clear as possible, which is not what happens in normal conversation. In normal conversation, you just say what you want to say, and the other person hears you, or they ask you to say it again, right?
I think that's the part that makes it the
Pardon me?
hardest. That's the part that makes it the hardest because you don't know whether or not they understand.
Well, how might you get a guess that they understand?
We can ask them, I guess.
You can absolutely ask them, and that's something that people don't do often enough during a speech or during a workshop or when they're teaching a class. They don't stop as much as they could and say, is that clear? You want me to go over it again? Do you want to hear it again? Do you want me to explain it different? Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? Absolutely, you can ask. But how else? Now, right now, I feel pretty confident that you followed everything I've said up until this point. Why am I confident about that?
You know who you're talking about.
Well, that's partly it, but knowing what I'm talking about and being able to communicate it to you are not the same thing. So why do I feel confident that you're following me so far?
Because of the feedback.
Because of the feedback. Now, what feedback what feedback are you referring to?
You asked us a question.
Okay. So we're back to asking questions, and I support that, but there's another reason why I feel confident. I'm looking at you, right? And just as we all know how to talk, we also know how to read another person. Most of us know that. Now, that doesn't mean you're always going to do it right, and that doesn't mean that you always understand what you're seeing. But if you're looking and you're trying to see, and you're trying to get visual feedback, as well as asking the question, then you're going to have a pretty good idea if people are tracking. And again, this is something that speakers could do more of. If it doesn't look like people are tracking, then you can try something different. Try what you're explaining in a different way, or slow down, or speed up, or ask a question, right? So these are all tools that we have as public speakers. The main point is that we're trying to not just deliver content, but create a relationship that's built around that content. And we take responsibility for the relationship. It's not your problem if I'm incomprehensible. It's my problem. And I'm the one who needs to clean that up, right? So that, to me, is the big difference between talking and speaking. Speaking is more polished, but not because we're trying to show off how smooth we are, rather because we are trying to make it really easy to be heard. It's all about being heard. I want to be heard, and that way you can accept or reject the ideas that I present, but it won't be because you didn't hear them, right? So some of it is very simple. Being heard is pretty simple and pretty mechanical, and there are discrete steps that go into it, and I'm using a lot of them right now. I'm using a lot of public speaking best practices to make it hopefully easier for you to hear me. So what am I doing? What best practices, what skills am I using to be heard?
You want to face the audience.
I'm facing the audience, absolutely. I'm not talking to my slide. I'm not turning around every 3 seconds to make sure the slide is okay. I know it's okay. I checked it out when I put it up there. It was okay then. It's still okay. I don't need to look again, right? What else am I doing? See if you can pick it apart.
Well, I think you're moving your arms too. I think that.
I'm gesturing a lot. Now, that's a matter of taste. Some people might like that. Some people might not like it. You want to gesture as a speaker at the same level you would when you're just talking. You want to be yourself. That's another thing I'm doing. I'm being very conversational. This is not a formal presentation because I am not speaking at a State Department dinner. Most of the time, being conversational will serve you better than being formal. That means that a lot of times when we write a presentation, our language is too formal because it's written language. And then when we go and deliver what we've written, it can sound a little stiff because we haven't translated from written language to conversational language. And you want to do that. You want to make that translation so that, again, you're more accessible, you're building more of a relationship. What else am I doing? Does anybody hear anything else that I'm doing to make my delivery more polished and easier to hear?
Changing
Well,
the tone.
Changing my tone, absolutely. What else?
I think you're trying to be clear as every pronunciation there.
Yes, yes, I'm pronouncing very carefully. Now, does it sound like I'm working really hard to pronounce carefully, or does it sound like I'm just talking?
So you're talking.
It sounds like I'm talking, but in fact, I'm pronouncing every single syllable that I say. There's not a sound coming out of my mouth that I'm not working pretty hard to, and I'm going to step it up just a little bit so you can hear it. I am working very hard to articulate clearly so that you can hear every single syllable. And when I say that I'm working hard, I mean physically. I'm using energy, physical energy, to produce clear sound. But because I'm just taking it down, see, what I'm doing right now is easy to hear. You can hear me working to articulate, right? But if I take it down a notch, then you don't hear it anymore. You don't hear the work, but you hear the pronunciation. Now, how do you get to something like that? Well, you practice. A couple of seconds a day, you practice articulating. And this is how you do it. Consonants are what gets articulated. Because you know what a vowel is. A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y. They're soft sounds. They have no edges. So you cannot articulate a vowel. Articulate means you're putting an edge on it. Well, you can't do that with a vowel because there's no beginning, there's no end, there's just this kind of soft sound thing. But consonants can be articulated like crazy. I call it chewing them up because you're using a lot of mouth action, just like when you chew your food. The physical energy of articulating your consonants is kind of similar to the physical energy of chewing your dinner. Just getting everything moving a little bit, which we don't normally do when we talk. So I want you to try something. Repeat after me. I'm going to make a sound, you repeat it, okay? Ba.
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 Good. Spit it out. Ka.
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 Da.
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 Ga.
Ga.
Ja.
Ja.
Pa.
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 Ta.
Ta.
And I think I left out ka.
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 Great. Okay. So do you see how you can actually put a little bit more of an edge on your consonants by biting them off? That is how you articulate. So repeat after me. I am articulating. I am articulating. There you go. That's it. If you were to do that for 5 seconds, before or after you brush your teeth every morning, a couple of things would happen. First, you would be tuning your ear to the sound of a clearly articulated consonant. Second, you would be getting used to making that extra little bit of energy with your mouth. And third, you'd be creating the mind-body connection that is really at the basis of public speaking. See, public speaking is a physical discipline. You can think about it forever. You can read books, you can study, you can go to Toastmasters and listen, but if you don't get up and speak, then you're not going to get to be a better speaker. It's something that you learn by doing because it's physical. How many of you have ever been involved with a sport? Any sport?
Yeah.
Yeah. How many of you have ever played a musical instrument? Any instrument? Okay, so it's exactly the same thing in sports and music. You take an action, a gesture, hitting the tennis ball or playing a certain chord, playing a scale, whatever it is, and you repeat it over and over and over and over and over. Your brain locks it in, and then when you need to do it in performance, boom, your brain just does it because you've conditioned that response, right? So among the responses that I've conditioned is articulating. I have myself so trained at this point that it's very difficult for me to not do it. You know, I can do it when I'm home and I'm tired, I'm watching TV, I'm like, oh, I don't want to talk about anything anymore, right? But it's very difficult to do in a business setting because I've got myself so, boom, you know, just do it, just put that extra energy in. And the thing is, that doesn't take a lot of time. A few seconds a day can do that for you. And articulation is just one of the small skills that makes you easier to hear and makes you clearer as a public speaker. So, articulation, I recommend it really strongly. Okay, here's another one. Pausing. Now, how much do you all pause when you speak? Do you pause a lot or a little bit? You never thought about it, you have no idea?
I pause to think.
You pause to think,
say.
right, okay. Yuan, what about you?
I don't remember that. I'm pretty sure because I mean,
You haven't thought about it.
Right?
Most people haven't thought about it, so that's more than reasonable. And what's your name?
Sharon,
Sharon.
to think.
To think. Okay. So pausing to think is for our benefit, but pausing can also be for the listener's benefit. And the best way to pause for the listener's benefit is at the end of an idea. So you state your idea, and then you stop talking, and let them think for a second and go, oh yeah, okay. And then you continue. Doesn't have to be a long pause, it can be very short. But if any of you are, I don't think anybody in this room does it, but a lot of people that I work with, a lot of one-on-one clients that I work with are millennials, and there's a millennial speech pattern which goes kind of like this. You have something to say, so you start talking, and then you have a digression, and that goes right in, and then you think of something else that goes with it, and you add that, and then you kind of have to change topics a little bit, but you just kind of make a right turn and keep going, and pretty soon you talk for 3, 4, 5 minutes, and you haven't stopped, you haven't paused, and there's no way for anybody to take in what you're saying, and by the time you get to the end, they forgot what you said at the beginning, and this is not the best way to be understood, right? None of you do that. I can see.
I think I do that.
You think you do that? Oh, so when is this thinking pause coming? When you're pausing to think? After you do that, you stop and pause? Yeah,
Because
okay.
then I feel like, oh, I don't have anything to talk about, so then I talk about something else. But then I think about something else to talk about for the first point, so I go back to that.
Ah, okay, alrighty. So there's a lot of theories about why millennials have this conversation pattern. Not everybody has it. I'm gonna say something like 80% of millennials.
It's not good. I've obviously recognized it, but I haven't really.
Well, but why isn't it good? You tell me. I mean, you're hearing my theory. Why do you think it's not good?
Because when you start doing things like presenting, you can't really elaborate.
Okay, definitely not good for presenting. Partly because you lose your place, but also because you don't have certain choices if you don't have a pause. See, the pause unlocks a lot of opportunity, a lot of choices that you wouldn't have within it. So for instance, if I'm really excited about something and then I want to take it way down, if I want to do that loud to soft thing, or if I want to talk really fast about something and then talk really slow, you know, all those things that might add more drama or more interest, you can't do it without a pause. You can't pivot your sound without a pause. Also, a pause gives you an opportunity to check where you're going, like you said. Otherwise, you're going to run out of things to say. So a pause would allow your brain to catch up with your mouth, or vice versa, whichever is running ahead of the other, right? So pausing is a good habit to get into, not just for public speaking, but for any kind of communication. And this is a good chance to say something that I didn't say before, which is when I talk about public speaking, I'm not just talking about presentations. I'm talking about any business or professional communication, a phone call, a meeting, a one-on-one with your boss, your over-controlling boss, whatever it is, coaching somebody that reports to you, a brainstorming session, anything. If it has to do with work, I consider it public speaking, and the same rules apply. So this is not just about presentations. This is about how to be clear and deliberate and be heard and be understood in any business situation. And it's also pretty good for home. It's also pretty good for communicating with your roommate, your kids, your spouse if you have one, other family members, other friends. It's all the same stuff. Yes?
And also slows down your speaking.
Mhm.
You're articulating, it also slows down.
That's very
what you're
true.
saying.
Pausing and articulating slow you down. And this is a good thing because we're all going way too fast. We're all flat out all the time, right? So I want to try and exercise, and I know that's a little awkward without a lot of people in the room, but could everybody stand up, please? Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to introduce ourselves, and I'd like you to follow the model that I'm going to give you. I'm going to say my name, and I'm going to pause between my first name and my last name, and I'm going to articulate both. Because you know how people say, hi, my name is Jezra Kaye. Well, thanks a lot, right? That wasn't very useful. So I am going, you have wonderful posture. Sharon is a good person to emulate for posture. I'm going to say my first name, pause, last name, pause, and then I am going to tell you a fact about myself. And it doesn't have to be an interesting fact. I want any fact, your age, where you live. You don't have to tell me your weight, number of siblings, where you grew up, whatever you want, okay? So here's the model, and then we're all going to do it. My name is Jezra Kaye, and I have 3 younger siblings. Gerald.
My name is Gerald Chow, and I'm currently a student at Rutgers Business School.
Great, excellent. Yuan.
My name is Yuan Li. I'm currently also a student at Rutgers Business School.
Great. Sharon?
My name is Sharon Daughtry, and I'm currently a MBA graduate 2018.
Yes, congratulations. So you just graduated?
Yes.
All right. Yesterday.
No, Friday.
Well, congratulations. Congratulations to all of you. It's really impressive. Awesome. Have a seat. Now for this group, one thing I'm going to suggest that you work on in those 3 to 5 seconds a day, every morning before or after you brush your teeth. And by the way, there are 2 reasons I say to do your public speaking practice before or after you brush your teeth. One is that you probably brush your teeth every morning, right? And the other is that you're in front of a mirror. Most people have a bathroom mirror. And when you're practicing public speaking, it's kind of nice to look at yourself because you'll see if you're doing something like, right? You'll notice if you look pained or panicky or you'll notice, and you can try and catch that and calm yourself down. And also for stuff like articulating, you can actually see your mouth move. Another thing that would be great for this group is speaking louder. And the way you speak louder is you open your mouth and you think, I'm going to speak louder. You just think it. And that will make your body produce the necessary action. But you have to open your mouth, because if your mouth is closed, you cannot be heard no matter how loud you think you're speaking. Right now I'm speaking very loud, but you don't hear me, do you? Because my mouth is closed, right? So you have to open your mouth to speak, and that goes back to that energy. The articulation energy, if you just use that energy also to open your mouth, let some sound out. Speak louder. Repeat after me. Speak louder.
Speak louder.
Good. Now your turn.
Speak louder.
There you go. Your turn.
Speak
Louder.
There you go. See, that was your practice for the day. Just checked it off. You practiced articulating. We just practiced speaking louder. If you did that in front of your mirror for 3 seconds before you brush your teeth, again, you're training your ear to hear a louder volume. You're training your body to make it. You're forming the mind-body connection. And next time you need to speak louder, you will have practice doing that, and it will come more easily. You may still feel ridiculous. That's okay. Public speaking is not about feeling comfortable, it's about being heard, being effective, being clear. Sometimes you're not going to feel comfortable, okay? But if you practice making a louder sound, now you have that option, right? So it's all about just a little bit of physical work to create a possible reaction that might be useful at some point. You're teaching a class. Well, you're going into business, so probably you might be teaching a class, and they're not paying attention. Class! Now they're paying attention. If you can't make that sound, you can't do that. You might not choose to do that, but you want to have the choice. And believe me, in a business meeting, no different. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm not finished yet. Right? I mean, that takes a lot of practice to be able to do that. You know, I like to finish my idea first. Don't think you won't want to do that. You will want to do that, but you can't, I promise you, but you can't do it if you haven't practiced doing it. It doesn't come naturally to most of us. That kind of boom, right? If you have a kid and the kid's running toward the street, you want to be able to yell, "Stop!" Right? So again, useful to practice. I was lucky. My kid always stopped at the sidewalk, so I never had to yell. It was great. But you see, I live in Brooklyn. I live near a neighborhood called Park Slope, and one of the memes that we have in Brooklyn is the Park Slope parent. And the Park Slope parent would say to the kid, this would be a white parent, white upper middle class parents, and they would say, "Johnny, we talked about you running into the street, and I don't understand why you're not listening to me. You should not be running into the street, Johnny. Johnny's a year and a half old. This is not correct communication. What you say to Johnny is, Johnny, stop!" That'll stop them, right?
Great.
Yeah, they will stop. So you want to have that capability to speak loud, and this is a soft-spoken group, so you might want to practice it, okay? Alrighty, now, we're talking about how to present dense information. Dense information, as we've already discussed, means different things in different scenarios. I taught this course to some statisticians recently, and believe me, not only was their information dense, I did not understand a word of it for the entire length of the class. I had no idea what they were talking about, but they all understood each other. So then the question is, how do you take that highly technical knowledge and break it down to something that somebody without your level of expertise can understand? That's a big challenge. But this challenge also occurs in business. You have something that you want to propose and you know a lot about it. How do you break it down for the CEO who only wants to hear one or two sentences? How do you break it down for the chief information officer who needs to know a different kind of implication than all the facts and figures and charts and graphs that you've been putting together, right? So this, I think, in a business context is about what it means to present dense information. What it means is, who am I talking to and what do they need to know? That's the question, right? And the deeper you go into your level of expertise, the harder it is to remember what it's like to not know that stuff. And I'll give you an example. The wonderful people that were here shortly talked a little while ago talking about Toastmasters. I was listening for what is Toastmasters. I didn't hear that. You guys all got it because you're all really smart. And perhaps you've heard of Toastmasters in another context, but I did not hear the phrase, Toastmasters is a club where people get together to practice public speaking.
So you're saying the people that try to sell this thing, that they themselves find out.
I think that is an important sentence to put at the beginning of your presentation. And I actually told them that because if you don't say that, you're assuming a knowledge base that may not be there. Now, again, you guys are really smart. You got it. It only took you like 2 minutes to, oh yeah, right, public speaking club, I get it. On the other hand, why not tell? Why not just say, this is a public speaking club. We get together on a voluntary basis, we pay a modest fee, and everybody works on their public speaking as often as they can come to our weekly meetings. So it starts at the beginning. What they did was they said, well, what Justin did, and not at all to critique him, because we all do this in our area of expertise. And I am critiquing him. What I meant is I'm not trying to be cruel or superior. If I'm talking about what I do, I make the same mistake. We all make it. But he jumped into the middle. You said, I said to him, what happens at a meeting? And he said, people are going to critique your ums. That's not what happens at a meeting. That's not the core of it. That's a separate side activity. So he's down in the weeds without having told us what the basic activity is. What happens in a meeting is that everybody gets an opportunity to make short presentations to the group and get feedback, right? So this is how difficult it is to break it down when you know something so well that you just figure everybody knows it. But everybody doesn't, like me with my data scientists the other night. I mean, they were explaining all kinds of wonderful things to me. I didn't even know what the topic was, right? And that can happen, And the more expert you are in your area of study or professional involvement, the easier it is to just forget. There's a word for that, a phrase. It's called the curse of knowledge. The curse of knowledge is that you don't remember what it's like to not know. And there's a way that you can solve that problem. In the world of yoga, or Eastern philosophy as well, there's something called beginner's mind, where you try to approach a topic as if you knew nothing about it, as if you were innocent, as if you were a beginner. It's not so easy to do. And in a way, that's what we're talking about in this workshop today, in this presentation. We're talking about beginner's mind. Instead, what we tend to do is we tend to dump on the people who are listening. We dump everything we know, right? So what's more easy than to just start saying everything that you know without stopping to think, wait a minute, what does the other person need to hear? What do they need to understand? How can I organize it for them? How can I be sure that I am fulfilling their need to know and not just my need to tell, right? Really easy to just dump everything and not do that.
I think part of the problem, I don't know about you guys, but for me at least, like for school,
Yes.
like we're not really experts at what we learned within a semester. So how do you really give an effective presentation if
okay.
you're not an expert?
All right, so this is such an important question.
Because at that point you just, all right, I want to get my portion over with, let my teammates take care of the rest.
Okay.
So that's why I dumped the information.
Okay, so there are two separate things that you're talking about, and let me break it apart for you. Because you're talking first about, well, I'm not really an expert, and second about, I want to get it over with, right? So let's take those one on one. First, of course you're not the world's greatest expert. None of us are the world's greatest expert on anything. There will always be somebody who knows more than you do. Possibly right in that classroom, your professor, or another student who is much more deeply interested in that particular piece of content than you are. So you're never gonna know more than every possible listener. If that's what it means to be an expert, forget it. Then you got nothing to say anytime to anybody, and yet you do have things to say. Why? Because even if you are not the most knowledgeable, you bring a unique perspective based on your experience, based on your interests, based on the life that you've lived, the thoughts that you have. So without being the most knowledgeable person in the universe, you still can have something very valuable to say. And part of public speaking, to be a successful public speaker, you have to hold on to that. You have to discipline yourself to believe that you have something worth saying, even if you're not the most expert, right? Here I am working with these data scientists, and I have no idea what they're talking about, and I'm trying to tell them how to be more clear in their communication. I mean, that was very scary. And I said, you guys are scary, just scary smart. But I'm there to bring a perspective that they don't have. And if I let myself get overwhelmed and intimidated by the fact that they're such geniuses in a certain area, then I'm gonna freak out and not be able to bring my perspective. So you have to hold on to the idea that you bring value. There are many different kinds of value. Being the most expert, the most knowledgeable, it's like being the thinnest or the richest or the happiest or the most successful. Forget it, right? There is no such thing as being the most of anything, not in a world of 7 billion people. There's an expression, I have friends who lived in Beijing for 10 years, and they said that in Beijing there was an expression which was that in China, if you are 1 in a million, there are 1,100 people just like you, which is statistically accurate. And it really puts things in perspective, right? So the question is not, how can I be good enough, or how can I be the best, or am I expert enough? The question is, what do I bring to this conversation? And if you look for that, you'll find it. But it's a discipline. It's a lot of public speaking, I said it's a physical discipline. This is the mental part of the discipline. The mental part of the discipline is not freaking out, right? It's holding the position that I have something that's worth saying. And you do, because you're a human being. You're smart, you care, you're taking the class, you got something to say. You do. We just know that. But sometimes it can be hard to hold on to that when you're in the hot seat. So that's the mental discipline, is holding on to that. Now, the other thing you said was, I want to rush to get it over with. You didn't say rush, but you said, I want to get it over with. Right, I want to get it over with. So here's the thing. Rushing through it means that people can't hear you, you're not breathing, you're not present in the moment, you're not succeeding at communicating your thoughts, and so you're going to have a bad experience and feel like a failure. This is not the desired effect.
Yeah, I know.
Right? But it takes tremendous self-awareness and self-discipline to stop that impulse, that fight, flight, or freeze response. So fight, flight, or freeze, right? It's triggered by your amygdala, which is a portion of your brain that you cannot talk to. The amygdala, the communication is one way. It tells you what to do. You don't tell it what to do. And basically it tells you 3 things. Run! Right? Or freeze.
Okay.
Right? Or fight! Those are the only 3 things it knows. So it's going to push one of those at you. So for you, it's run. Right? Flight. Get me out of here. Right? For other people, and this, believe it or not, is actually even more painful, the freeze response is even more painful for public speaking, because you choke. You can't, I can't say anything. I can't do anything. And notice I'm not breathing, right? That's even more painful. But that amygdala reaction that's pushing you to not be in the moment, to not trust yourself, to not take pride in whatever you're communicating, it is, what's the word I'm looking for? It's autonomic. You can't do anything about it except practice. That's what you can do. If you've practiced public speaking in general, pausing, slowing down, even if you're lucky enough to be able to prepare in advance for what you're going to say in class, you practice saying that in a relaxed, slow way, then you're countering the amygdala fight, flight, or freeze response. And that's good, because countering it in advance means that it will have less power in the moment. If you just throw yourself up there and you have no idea how to cope with it, that can be extremely unpleasant. Yeah. So that is what practice is for. It's for actually training yourself to resist that impulse, which is unpleasant. It really is. What are we going to do now? Right?
But another part of that is remembering what you have to say. Because
take your notes up with you. Do not ever memorize. Do not ever count in your memory, because part of the freeze reaction is your mind goes blank.
Exactly.
Yes, very painful. So, hello, what have I got right here? What are these notes?
Because that's another thing when you're not an expert. You have to memorize that and at the same time do all the things you're talking about, like enunciating, gesturing.
Well, you don't think about that stuff when you're presenting. Let me back up a couple of slides. I want to show you something. When I introduce this picture of the public speaking relationship, I'm in your way, aren't I?
No, I'm good.
You good? You can see? Okay. So we talked about the public speaking relationship, but we only talked about the inside triangle. Let's have a look at the outside triangle as well. The outside triangle is the public speaking process, right? Now, most people, when they're preparing a speech, they gather their content, big data dump, throw it into PowerPoint, hide, show up to give the speech, right? I mean, that's in business in particular, because nobody has any time, and also they're afraid. And who can blame them? It's scary. You know, this is not a criticism, right? So, when you gather your content, you've done the first step. You've done the prepare step. You've gathered it, you've organized it, hopefully you've tried to put it into conversational language, you've gotten rid of things that your audience doesn't need to hear. It's not something you do once, you got to look at it a couple of times. And this is a big problem in business. People sometimes don't even know they're presenting the next day until they're walking out the office at 7, 8 o'clock at night. And then by the time, you know, they go home and they have dinner and now they got to do a presentation, it's midnight, they're exhausted, they throw it in, they go to sleep, tomorrow they got to give it. This is very typical, right? So typical but not ideal. Ideally, you gather your content and then you try and deliver it, try and talk through it. Because it's speaking, you can't tell if what you have on the page is any good until you speak it. So you speak it and, oh, I think I'm going to move this and take out that, and I don't really like this other thing. And then you fix it up and you go away, you come back a day later, do it again, do it again, do it again. All of that is preparation. That's step one. Now we get to step two. So you've got content. You spent a little time on it. You're pretty happy with it. Is it the most brilliant content of life? No. Somebody else is going to be smarter about this. Is it the funniest or the most exciting? Probably not. But is it worthwhile? Yes. Because you took your assignment seriously and you have respect for what you're doing and for yourself and for your audience. So you know what? It's good enough. And you got to just hang on to that. Now, step two, practice. So you stand, and I recommend having a piece of paper, and you stand in front of a mirror and you talk. Talk to the mirror. You just pretend that the mirror is your audience and the person in the mirror is your audience, and you say, and now I want to tell you about how the public speaking relationship and the public speaking process fit together. Right? And you practice saying it really slowly. This is when you think about the pausing, the articulation. Now is when you think about it, and that's why on this diagram, next to practice, which is the second step, I've got the word you because this is where you're working on you. See, a lot of people think that when you practice public speaking, you're practicing words. You don't need to practice words. You know how to read them or how to interpret a bullet point. You know how to talk about an idea. You don't practice words. You practice how you want to be when you bring these ideas to your audience. Now, everybody has a different idea of how they want to be. I have a very clear idea of how I want to be when I speak to an audience. And if I asked you to describe me, you're going to have pretty good unanimity, along with every other audience I've spoken to for the last 10 years. You're going to describe me the same because I'm pretty clear about how I want to be. How do I want to be? I want to be smart. I want to be friendly. I want to be just a little bit unconventional, tiny bit edgy for an old broad, just a tiny bit, right? I mean, is that what's coming across? Well, surprise, it's coming across because I really practice bringing a certain feeling to whatever I present. And you do that long enough, it takes. I've been doing this a long time, so it takes. It's pretty reliable. I can pretty reliably know that I'm going to come across the way I want to come across. People may like it, not like it, whatever. But it isn't random. It's not going to be like some crazy thing that never happened before. That's practice. It gives you a little more control over how you act and how you feel in the presenting situation. And that is what practice is for. That's when you're articulating. That's when you're pausing. That's when you're taking ideas that don't flow naturally and working them out differently.
So do you like work off a script or notes or something?
I like to work off a script, but ideally what happens is, because I'm a writer, I like to write things out. But every time I practice it, it changes.
Yeah.
It gets more conversational, and I'm internalizing more and more, so I don't have to look at it as much. So maybe I'd read the script the first 2, 3, 4 times, and the next 2, 3, 4 times what I want to do is I want to take a highlighter, a yellow highlighter, and I want to mark my script so that only the stuff that I have trouble remembering or that I need to be sure gets covered, that's highlighted in yellow. And I don't have to look at the rest of it. So what I did was I took my script and I used a highlighter to change it to bullet points. Those yellow highlights are my bullets. And there may be a whole paragraph that I want to read word for word because it's complicated or it's important or I'm not that familiar with it and I don't want to mess it up. But there are going to be other things that I can just talk about. I see the bullet, I just talk about it, right? Thank you very much for coming. It was a pleasure.
I left, my
Email?
email address, you said.
Great.
Email address.
Yes.
Tell me about a book, I don't.
Oh, in the box, grab a book. Thank you for remembering. And as a matter of fact, if you don't mind, grab 3. We'll give them out now. That's excellent. So during the practicing process, your script is going to morph. And this is called internalizing. And this is what you want to do instead of memorizing. You never want to memorize. What you want to do is internalize a sense of where you're going. Right? Sharon, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Good to see you on
So that's practicing. That's what you're practicing for. You're practicing how you want to feel, how you want to be, how you want to feel. And while we're talking about it, let's do a little exercise. But just to finish out this diagram before we do,
I'm going to listen to that.
just to finish out, the 3rd stage, when you're presenting, you're not practicing anymore. We're done with that. When you're presenting, you're just talking to people. This is the part where the relationship kicks in. And thinking about the people that you're talking to is what activates the relationship. So I'm articulating, but I'm not working on articulating. That's done. I'm not trying to articulate. I'm just doing it automatically because I've practiced it so much. What I'm doing, what I'm thinking about, where my energy is going right now is you guys. And just being grateful that you're here and wanting to talk to you and wanting you to understand and wanting to see if you have questions, right? Wanting to see if it's interesting to you. Really, at the presentation stage, it's all about the people you're talking to. It's not about practicing. It's not about you anymore. You want to lock that in before you get to the presentation, both as a general thing and specifically if you have the time with regard to a particular presentation, right? So that's how that works. So let's do an exercise. This character that I bring to my public speaking, I think of it as my public speaking avatar. And I told you who she is. She's warm, she's smart, and she's a little bit edgy, tiny bit edgy, right? Her name is Jezra Warrior Princess. So that's the character that you've been interacting with. That's the avatar that I've created to simplify all the little things that go into public speaking. I just rolled them into that one character, and now I only have to do one thing. Just be her. I don't have to do this plus that. I don't have to articulate plus pause, plus try and stand up straight, plus not make horrible faces, plus check for I don't have to do anything except just become my avatar because I've got everything rolled into that character. Does that make sense? The analogy that works for me is the superhero analogy. Are you at all into Marvel comics, superheroes, anything like that? Not really. Okay, so we have to find another metaphor for you. Are you into gaming at all? Online gaming?
You mean how could I categorize myself as if I'm presenting?
Well, the question is the concept of avatar. Having an avatar, having a representative of yourself. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm thinking about it because I
Okay.
think it's very important for me.
It is important.
Yeah.
And by the way, chapter 1 in your books is about avatars, and it's a good chapter to read. And I will also send you some articles and handouts and things that you can look at about this along with the presentation, along with the slides. So the way to put your avatar together, it's really very simple. Write down 3 or 4 adjectives that describe how you want to be seen when you're speaking to an audience. So I gave you mine: smart, warm, edgy. I would write down those 3 adjectives. You might want to appear as confident or expert or funny or relaxed or sexy or anything that you want. What are 3 or 4 adjectives that describe the way you would like to be seen by your audience when you're speaking? And some of them may be aspirational. For instance, my avatar, the 4th adjective that I did not share with you is calm. She is calm, but I'm actually not. I'm actually kind of anxious and...
Really?
Yeah. Well, because you're interacting with my avatar, and she's calm. But trust me, if you could have seen me at midnight last night going, oh my God, what am I going to do tomorrow? Right? But you don't need to see that. You don't need that. I mean, you do. It's funny. It's funny, and it's human. We're all very, very, very complicated. We have 100 different qualities. But when you go to speak, you don't need all of them. Some of them are going to get in your way, right? Being anxious is not going to be helpful to me.
But some people show anxiety more than others.
That's right. But this, again, is the discipline, the mental discipline. Physical discipline, mental discipline. Mental discipline is that you make certain decisions. And one decision that I've made is that I am going to try to not show anxiety when I'm speaking. So when I practice, I don't just practice what I'm saying, I practice being Jezra Warrior Princess. And Jezra Warrior Princess is not anxious. So there it is, it's taken care of. As long as I can hold on to being her, right? And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes I'm home and I'm writing a speech or I'm working and I'm all like tearing my hair out. My husband will come in and say, where's your avatar? And I'll be like, go away! You know? She's not here, go away. So you can't always get it when you need it, but if you practice feeling a certain way, it's easier to feel that way in the future. So write down 3 or 4 adjectives.